Hey guys! Tonight we drift through velvet drapes and candlelight into the quietly restless world of Victorian women. You're not a duchess or a street urchin, not tonight. You're somewhere in between a gently bred lady, respectable and sleepless, pacing the edge of midnight with nothing but your shadow for company. The gaslights outside your window hiss faintly, casting crooked halos against the lace curtains. It's late or early, but there's no clock in your bedroom, because ticking breeds anxiety. So instead, you guess the hour by how many times your slippered feet have padded across the Turkish rug. The room is heavy with perfume and starch. Your corset may be loosened, but your ribs still remember the squeeze. And you, like so many Victorian women, are trying not to think. Because thinking leads to wakefulness, and wakefulness, you've been warned, leads to, well, unladylike things. You might not survive this night not socially. At least, one too many missed hours of sleep, and the whispers begin. Nerves, they say. Overexertion of the imagination. You could be sent to Brighton to rest, or worse, handed a damp cloth soaked in laudanum and told to hush. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The chamber you pace through is orderly and oppressive. Heavy furniture, high-backed chairs that have never been sat in. The wallpaper repeats with mechanical precision, faded roses, faintly sepia with age. You've already fluffed the pillows, goosed down, tested the warmth of the stoneware bed warmer, and tucked your rosary under your copy of the Ladies' Monthly Review. Not because you're especially devout, but because last night you dreamed it whispered to you. The fire flickers low. Your maid, Judith, left 2 hours ago, her candle dipping as she bobbed out of the room. She's long gone to her own thin blanket in the attic, where it's colder but freer. You envy her a little. She doesn't have a reputation to uphold or visitors in the morning expecting you to look effortlessly refreshed and modestly radiant. Victorian women were expected to be statues by day, but angels by night, restful, quiet, untouched by frustration. Sleep, you're told, reflects your moral balance. To toss and turn too much, a sign of an overindulged mind, a hungry soul, possibly even an impure one. Historians still argue whether this belief came more from religious pressure or medical ignorance, but the result is the same. A sleepless night isn't just exhausting, it's suspect. You lie back in bed. The sheets are cool, too cool. The linen is rougher than you remembered. One toe sticks out and immediately regrets it. You sigh. Somewhere in the house. A pipe lets out a metallic cough. Maybe it's the boiler. Maybe it's the ghost your cousin swore she saw when she visited last Easter. You're not alone. Across England, thousands of women just like you are lying in similar beds, blinking up at similar ceilings, with similar thoughts creeping in. The census won't tell you this, but their diaries will. Pages and pages filled not with scandal or adventure, but with entries like could not sleep, heart raced, tried prayers, no effect. And you're not entirely powerless. You have a routine. After all, you whisper a verse, you turn the pillow, you breathe in through the nose, count 4, exhale through the mouth. You don't call it meditation, because the term hasn't quite caught on yet, but it's close enough. Still, nothing. Just your own mind, like a spinning teacup that refuses to be set down. The cause? Possibly anything. Did you read too late? Walk too little? Eat that custard tart past sunset? Or maybe it's your womb again. The Victorians loved blaming that. It floats, apparently, untethered inside you like a balloon of mischief. Here's your first quirky tidbit of the night. One Victorian expert recommended tethering emotional overstimulation by soaking your feet in mustard water before bed. Not too hot. Not too cold, just enough to remind you that your soul has physical anchorage. You tried it once. The result, slightly tinged bed linens and no discernible improvement. You stare at the ceiling. The plaster above you is cracked slightly, like a map of nowhere in particular. You trace imaginary roads with your eyes. Try to keep them open. Blink slower. There's a strange magic to this method. You don't fall asleep by trying. You fall asleep by pretending not to care. Another creak. The bed frame this time. Oak, hand-carved, and eternally disapproving. You remember something your aunt once said, "If you can't sleep, imagine you're already dreaming." She died very peacefully, allegedly while meditating next to a bowl of lavender and a live turtle. It's unclear whether the turtle was symbolic or just lost. You close your eyes again. The fan hums softly. Wait. No, not yet. That's us, not you. In your room. The hum is the gentle rhythm of your own breathing and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Eventually, your thoughts begin to slow, not because anything is resolved, but because repetition is tiring. The pattern of not sleeping becomes its own lullaby. And then, maybe, just maybe your muscles soften, your shoulders sink a little. A tiny surrender. And if not, well, we've still got 19 more chances. You get up again. Quietly. Carefully. No sudden moves. The floorboards might cry out like an old man with a grudge. You're not even sure what you're looking for. Some comfort. A ritual. A distraction. Probably food. You head to the little side table where the night's provisions have been left under a delicate lace cover. There it is. A small tray with a cracked porcelain teacup, a few dry biscuits that once dreamed of being toast, and a tiny glass bottle of something unlabeled but slightly ominous. Judith always brings the same assortment. The tea is chamomile, most likely safe, dull, vaguely bitter. You sip it anyway. Anything warm feels like progress. Victorian women were experts at these small midnight gestures. Insomnia wasn't new, and it certainly wasn't rare, but it wasn't exactly something to boast about. So instead of talking, they tinkered, they stirred tea, they nibbled toast, they counted stitches in their embroidery. They turned their insomnia into quiet motion. You pick up a biscuit, it's stale, but it gives your jaw something to do, and your mind something to chew on besides worry. A little edge of salt. A crumb of nostalgia. Your grandmother used to make these. She never slept either. She just called it waiting for the dawn. Now that bottle. You roll it gently between your fingers. You know what's inside. It's a sleep tincture, one of dozens marketed to ladies of delicate health. And by marketed, we mean whispered about at tea, passed hand to hand, and often concealed in labeled boxes that said things like lozenges or liniment. Your bottle smells faintly of honey and something sharp underneath, possibly valerian root, possibly opium, possibly both. Here's your mainstream fact. Victorian Britain was awash in narcotics, often completely legal, and sold openly in shops with charming names like Mother Wren's Soothing Elixir or Dr. Nightingale's Midnight Draught. Entire generations dosed themselves to sleep with concoctions that would be illegal today. And yet, you hesitate. You've used it before, sure, but only on the worst nights, the nights when the walls feel like they're breathing with you, and the moon's light creeps in like it wants to confess something. This isn't quite one of those nights. Not yet. You set the bottle down. Victorian medicine books were a patchwork of science, superstition, and sheer guesswork. One pamphlet you once read insisted that eating a slice of raw onion before bed could prevent nightmares and induce a sense of well-mannered fatigue. Another suggested rubbing goose grease on the soles of your feet and then wrapping them in flannel. That one you tried exactly once. Judith still won't let you forget the smell. Historians still argue whether most of these remedies actually soothed the body or simply bored it into submission. After all, Even laudanum came with a side of vivid, disturbing dreams. Not always restful, but certainly distracting. You make your way back to the bed. The tea helps a little. It gives your hands something warm to cradle. That alone makes you feel less unmoored. But the sleep still won't come. You lie back down. The pillow's indent still holds your shape, like it's been waiting. You pull the blanket up just under your chin and stare toward the ceiling again. There's something oddly ceremonial about the way you move now, like you're acting out the motions of a person who sleeps, hoping your body eventually catches on. Another quirky tidbit for you. Queen Victoria herself reportedly struggled with insomnia after Prince Albert died. Grief will do that, but rather than tossing in bed, she ordered her servants to wheel in his empty breakfast table every morning, unchanged, a silent ritual, a reminder, possibly a way to exhaust herself emotionally before nightfall. You aren't quite mourning anyone, but still, sleep evades you like a shy suitor. You flirt with it, coax it, beg it. Nothing. You adjust the sheets again. They're good linen, finely pressed, yet suddenly feel like they're made of rice paper and guilt. And what about the food? Could that be it? Dinner was hours ago. Roast mutton and turnips, possibly a custard, but nothing light, nothing warm before bed except the tea. The Victorian idea of a night bite wasn't much. Most ladies feared that a full stomach would ruin complexion, not to mention cause vivid humors during dreams. But some doctors disagreed. They suggested gentle nourishment milquetoast. For example, milk-soaked bread warmed just enough to seem vaguely edible. Others went weirder, fig syrup, pine cone extract, or even mashed prunes, which one physician swore would relax the spirit and the bowels in equal measure. You didn't have any of that tonight, just tea and regret, and the sense that morning is far too far away. Somewhere outside, a carriage rumbles by. Hooves clatter across cobblestones, a whip cracks, and then silence again. The city sleeps in waves. You wish you could join them. Your mind drifts briefly to your diary. You keep it in the drawer, the one with the squeaky hinge. You could write in it. Maybe. Chronicle this moment. Could not sleep again. Felt hollow. Took tea. Regretted toast. But that feels like giving in. Like admitting defeat to the page. Instead, you close your eyes once more. Listen to the quiet clink of the teacup cooling on porcelain. Feel the faint weight of your body against the mattress. The pressure of time, like fog, hanging just above your chest. You are not alone. You are one of many. In country homes, narrow city flats, even great manor houses, dozens, maybe hundreds of women lie just like this, waiting, hoping, thinking about tea and toast and tinctures that sometimes work, but mostly don't. And soon, perhaps, you'll sleep, or not. But the night rolls forward either way. The light hasn't changed, but something in the air has. You know this part of the night well. It's that thin hour where the candle gutters without warning, and your own thoughts feel like someone else's voice in the room. You roll onto your side, but even that feels like too much effort. There's a soft rustle as your hair, carefully arranged hours ago, shifts against the pillow. Too tight, too heavy, too Victorian. You'd think bedtime would be a relief, a moment to finally let go. But no, because this is the age of proper appearances, and even your hair isn't allowed to truly rest. You reach up and feel it, thick braids coiled like overcooked rope. You remember sitting at your vanity while Judith brushed your hair in long, gentle strokes, exactly 100, as advised by the domestic oracle. Then came the pinning, the twisting, the little satin ribbons that looked dainty but stabbed like tiny corset stays. Victorian ladies didn't just go to bed. They prepared for bed, as if it were a modest theatrical production. You had to transform from the image of day composed, corseted, coiffed, to the image of night pure, demure, slightly wilted. Sleepwear was a costume too, and frankly, it was no less elaborate. Tonight, you're wearing a white cotton nightdress embroidered with pale blue forget-me-nots. Long sleeves, high neck, lace trim at the cuffs. Beneath that, a petticoat. Yes, a night petticoat. No one's seeing it, but propriety demands it anyway. And on your head, the dreaded bed bonnet. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian bonnets weren't just for looks. They were filled with lavender buds or curls of paper soaked in vinegar, thought to draw out bad spirits through the scalp. Others were so tightly tied that women woke up with impressions on their foreheads like quilted wallpaper. You reach up now and untie yours with stiff fingers. The relief is immediate, like taking off earrings after a long ball, except less glamorous and more itchy. You toss the bonnet to the chair, where it lands like a crumpled accusation. Hair was serious business. It was a woman's crown, her symbol of virtue, her romantic currency. That meant it needed constant upkeep even in sleep. If it tangled, you were careless. If it thinned, you were ill. If it curled the wrong way, well, clearly your womb was acting up again. Historians still argue whether these elaborate bedtime hair rituals were genuinely believed to improve sleep or simply another means of control, because nothing says freedom like brushing your scalp until it bleeds and calling it restful. You sit up slowly, running your fingers through the loosened plaits. Each one crackles slightly with static and starch. You try to shake it out. You look like a haunted Bronte heroine, just the hair, none of the poetry. There's a hairbrush on the vanity, silver-backed, with a few strands still clinging like ghosts of past nights. You pick it up, but the idea of brushing again exhausts you. Still, you remember the warning. Neglected hair leads to nightmares, as if your dreams need help being dramatic. The room seems darker now, or maybe that's your mood, syncing with the hour. You remember one passage from a book you read last year. It claimed that a woman's dreams could be influenced by the direction she slept in. North-facing beds were said to invite peace, while south-facing beds summoned troubled dreams. You don't know what direction you're facing, but suddenly you hope it's not south. You lie back down and fluff your hair beneath you like a half-plucked pillow. It's not comfortable, but it's at least yours. The pins have left little dents in your scalp. You press your hand against them, as if smoothing down memories. Your breathing slows again. You count backward from 100, 99, 98, 97. Oh, now you're wondering if you locked the armoire. You try again. The weight of the room settles. The walls are thick, the curtains thicker. No breeze, just the faint scent of beeswax and starch, and the ghost of lavender from the bonnet you banished. You wonder if Judith has to wear one too. Probably not. Her hair is short and practical, like her patience. That's the thing about this whole performance. Half the rituals aren't for you. They're for whoever might see you, and no one's seeing you now, but still, you wear the gown, tie the bonnet, comb the hair, sip the tea, because rest, in this house, is something to be earned, not expected. Your fingers drift back to your scalp, rubbing small circles like you're coaxing your brain into quiet. You hum a little, not a tune, just a sound. Vibration more than melody. You're not musical, but your mother used to hum that same note when she couldn't sleep. Said it matched the tone of her heartbeat when she was calm. You never verified that with science. Didn't need to. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the late 1800s, a surprising number of upper-class women were being treated for female insomnia, a vague diagnosis that often lumped together anxiety, menopause, and the sheer weight of daily restriction. One journal noted that women suffer more from wakefulness due to the sensitivity of their emotional systems. Translation: you were tired because society wouldn't let you breathe. You shift again. Pull the blanket higher. There's no breeze, but you suddenly feel cold. Not a real cold, just the kind that creeps in when you feel too exposed, even alone. The hairbrush still sits on the vanity, watching you like it knows something. You make a silent promise you'll brush properly in the morning. For now, it's enough that you removed the bonnet. That's a win. That's progress. Your thoughts soften slightly. Edges blur. For a moment, you forget what time it is. And that's the most restful thing that's happened all night. The room doesn't change, but something in you does. You're still lying there, eyes open, half watching the shadows dance across the ceiling like shy ghosts at a school recital. But now your mind starts to narrate. Not dramatically, no one's getting published tonight, but gently, like a bored librarian flipping through a journal no one's asked about in years. And then, inevitably, you think maybe you should write it down. Not a novel, not a scandalous tale or biting social critique, just the truth. A record of your own sleeplessness, like a ledger for hours lost. And this, in the curious world of Victorian women, was not unusual at all. Many respectable ladies of the era kept insomnia journals. Sometimes they called them night books, or quiet ledgers, or simply my little blue book. They weren't meant for publication. These weren't poetic musings or elegant laments. They were plain, factual, and deeply personal. Lines like woke at 2:15, tried to pray, failed, ate a biscuit, listened to mice, eventually slept. You slide out of bed again, your knees popping a little as they unbend and move to the writing desk. It's a small mahogany thing, elegant but cramped. On top, a lamp, a few pressed violets, and a leather-bound journal with a cracked spine. You open it to the last page. Your handwriting is tidy but fading, your ink is old, and your pen nib a bit tired. Still, you begin to write. Could not sleep again. Fourth night this week. Took tea. Hair too tight. Thoughts too loud. It's not much, but it's yours. A little proof that you existed in this small hour, somewhere between midnight and morning. Half a person in a full world. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Victorian women's diaries are among the richest records we have of daily emotional life in the 19th century. While the newspapers raved about empire and invention, women's journals recorded headaches, missed sleep, and the long, slow ache of boredom. You don't think your little note will change history, but there's something oddly comforting about it. A silent confession to a page that doesn't judge. You write a few more lines about the tea, the bonnet, the carriage you heard, about the strange dream you half remembered from 2 nights ago, something about walking through your grandmother's garden, but all the roses were made of bread. And now, a curious thing happens. Your breathing slows. It always does when you write. The pen has that power. You're not racing. You're just narrating. Softly, sleepily, like an author too tired to embellish. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some Victorian women wrote nighttime diaries in code not to keep secrets from others, but to make their own lives feel more mysterious. One woman used flowers as symbols for emotions. Another wrote every sentence backward. A third claimed she wrote only by moonlight, so the page might sleep before I do. You, thankfully, are slightly less dramatic. Your ink is smudging already. You blot it with a little square of linen and set the pen aside. You sit there for a moment longer, fingers cooling in the quiet. The lamplight flickers. Somewhere in the walls, something scratches, probably a mouse or a very soft ghost. Historians still argue whether the act of nighttime journaling was a true coping mechanism or just another culturally endorsed distraction. After all, writing didn't cure the sleeplessness, it only gave it form. But isn't that a kind of relief, to pin the fog to paper? You close the journal and tuck it under a stack of fashion magazines just in case anyone snoops. It's not embarrassment exactly, just privacy. Victorian bedrooms were never truly private. Servants came and went. Husbands barged in. Sisters borrowed things. So your journal becomes a secret garden, even if you never write anything scandalous. Back to bed. Again. The ritual repeats. You lie down. Pull the blanket, just so. Fluff the pillow. Close your eyes. Wait. There's a softness now. Not quite sleep, but not quite resistance either, like your mind is finally bored of itself. You start to think of other women, other houses. Your friend Caroline lives 2 streets away. She keeps a journal, too. She told you once, over an overly long afternoon tea, that she dreams in color, but only when she eats ginger biscuits before bed. You're not sure you believe her, but you like the idea of it. Then there's Aunt Eugenia, who once stayed awake for 3 full nights after reading The Sorrows of Young Werther. Claimed her heart hurt too much to rest. Her husband had to bribe her with new curtains to get her to lie down again. Emotional blackmail. Victorian style. And then there's you, scribbler of midnight notes, chronicler of nothing very important, pacing the soft hours like a watchman without a lantern. You sigh again. This time, it feels different, a little less sharp, a little more surrender. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. Let your hand fall over the edge of the bed. Listen to the silence and wonder what it sounds like to someone else. Not quite dreaming, not quite awake, but closer. You're just beginning to drift, fingers slack, breath deepening when click, a small, unmistakable sound, the kind your ears wait for all night without realizing it. You freeze, like a deer in a too fancy nightdress. Then, kriak. There it is again. Somewhere in the wall, in the floorboards, in the very bones of the house, something shifts. Welcome to Victorian nighttime. You don't move right away. Instead, you lie there and listen. There's always something to hear. A distant clatter, the wind brushing against the glass panes, the flutter of a moth batting at a curtain. If you really let your imagination wander, and why wouldn't you at this hour, you could believe it's footsteps. Or whispering, or a drawer opening just slightly in an empty room. Sound traveled differently in Victorian houses. No insulation. Hollow halls, echo chambers of oak and plaster. And for women especially the ones awake in the quiet hours, those sounds became both familiar and maddening. Eventually, you sit up. Again, you're not afraid. Not exactly. Just alert. Sleep seems like a joke now. The noises in the walls are louder than your dreams. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, one you keep folded at the foot of your bed, just for nights like this, and tiptoe to the door. Your slippers make almost no sound. You press your ear against the wood. Nothing. Well, not nothing. There's a faint creaking in the hallway, too slow and rhythmic to be rats. Could be the house settling, could be the stairs, could be Judith. You crack open the door and peer out. The hallway is dark, save for the faint orange glow of a gas lamp at the far end. You step out, quiet as regret, and begin to walk. Victorian houses at night are their own little worlds, part museum, part haunted ship. You pass portraits that glare at you in the flickering light. Furniture crouches like lurking animals. Every floorboard seems to have an opinion. You're not alone in this routine. Many women took walks at night, pacing softly through hallways to tire themselves out. Some called it taking a midnight constitutional. Others didn't name it at all. Just walked, because walking, unlike sleeping, gave you a sense of control. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many upper-class Victorian women suffered from what doctors called night disturbances, a vague term encompassing everything from insomnia to anxiety to vivid hallucinations. Some treatments involved rest, others more walking, preferably in enclosed spaces, and not too fast. Women weren't supposed to stride. You pass the parlor. The door's closed, but you can hear the grandfather clock ticking inside, each clunk like a reminder that you are still awake. You glance toward the window outside. The street is empty. fog creeping along the cobblestones, gas lamps like little moons. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then silence again. You think of your friend Charlotte, who once claimed her house spoke at night. She said it groaned when the weather changed, clicked when someone was thinking impure thoughts, her words, not yours, and wept softly near the nursery. You believed her, not because it made sense, but because your own house has moods too. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with nighttime noises was more psychological or structural. Houses were built to amplify. Cracks expanded. Pipes clanged. Wooden beams shifted like joints. And when a woman couldn't sleep, her attention sharpened until every tiny sound became a story. You reach the end of the hall and stand by the window. The pane is cold. You touch it, just to feel something that doesn't move or complain. The noises are quieter now, or maybe you've gotten used to them. Maybe they're part of the rhythm of the night, the background hum of existence in a too large house with too many rules. You turn around and walk back. Slowly, no need to rush. Rushing is for people with deadlines. You have only dawn to wait for, and it's still a rumor on the edge of the sky. Here's your quirky tidbit. One Victorian lady claimed she wore special listening boots. At night, soft slippers with padded soles designed to help her sneak around the house without disturbing the servants. She said she liked to investigate disturbances herself because her husband never heard them, or pretended not to. You don't have listening boots, but you do have practice. By now, you know which boards squeak and which don't. You move like someone rehearsing a dance no one will ever see. Back in your room, you close the door behind you. Gently. The bed looks almost smug, like it's been waiting for you to give up and return. You shake your head at it. You'll lie down, but not because it won. You crawl under the covers, tuck the shawl around your feet like a loyal hound. You lie still, listening again. This time, the house is quieter. Maybe it's sleeping, or maybe it's just ignoring you. You close your eyes. Count the sounds again. 1 creak, 2 ticks, a whistle of wind. The faint, repetitive thud of your heartbeat in your ears. And just like that, the walls seem softer, less like they're closing in, more like they're holding you. Sleep doesn't come, not yet, but neither does fear. You wake well, not quite. Let's say you realign to find that your arm has gone entirely numb. Your pillow has developed the approximate density of limestone, and your nightdress has twisted around you like a startled snake. Clearly, you've dozed off. For how long? Minutes, an hour. You'll never know. There's still no clock in the room. You swore off timekeeping 2 winters ago when your cousin Eloise said looking at the hour after midnight was a direct invitation to madness. You stretch, gently, like someone unfolding a love letter they regret writing. Your back cracks in 3 different spots. That's probably a good sign. The fire in the grate is nothing but whispers of ash now. Your room is cooler, not cold, but just enough to make you regret having only 1 blanket and a paper-thin nightgown that looks lovely, but insulates about as well as a slice of cucumber. You glance at the chair in the corner home to your sleepwear ensemble. You sigh. There's no use pretending anymore. You are not going back to sleep easily. And so begins the next inevitable phase of Victorian insomnia, the wardrobe adjustment. You climb out of bed and step cautiously onto the rug. The floor is cool and firm and annoyingly real beneath your feet. You reach for the first item of defense against the chill, a woolen house robe. You tie it around your waist with the enthusiasm of someone preparing for a duel. Now the socks. Yes, bedroom socks, knit, slightly scratchy, and dyed a cheerful gray. They pull up nearly to your knees because, in this era, ankles are the beginning of the end. Victorian sleepwear was many things: decorative, voluminous, occasionally embroidered with delicate threats in French, but one thing it wasn't: practical. Getting dressed for bed was an ordeal. and by the time you were dressed, you often weren't sleepy anymore. A cruel joke, played nightly and in cotton. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Middle and upper-class Victorian women commonly wore 3 to 5 pieces of clothing to bed, including a nightdress, petticoat, bed jacket or robe, stockings, and sometimes even fingerless gloves. Chill of the extremities, as one medical journal put it, was believed to cause everything from nightmares to emotional imbalance. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the small mirror above the wash basin. You look like a winded ghost, a bit too pale, wrapped in wool and lace, hair flattened on one side and puffed up on the other. Charming. You tug your nightcap back down over one ear. It flops rebelliously. You sigh again. At this point, it's less an expression and more a punctuation mark. You sit at the vanity. Not to brush your hair again, you've made peace with its chaos, but just to have something solid to lean on. You open the small drawer and pull out a pocket-sized illustrated booklet. Ladies' Evening Diversions, Gentle Amusements for the Sleepless Mind. You leaf through it absently. Knitting diagrams, tips for moral poetry, a list of hymns suitable for solitary humming. You try humming one. It sounds like a funeral march for a biscuit. But then your eyes catch something else, a section titled The Proper Way to Prepare for Bed. It reads like a stage direction from an overacted play. Let the lady proceed with calm dignity. Allow the brush to pass through the hair 50 times. Not quickly, but with grace. When donning her robe, she should imagine it is made of clouds, and her hands of light. You close the book. No thank you. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian etiquette guides advised women to rehearse their nightly undressing in front of a mirror, not for vanity, but to ensure their movements were elegant, even in solitude, because, apparently, even alone, you were never alone. You stand and pull the shawl tighter around you, then glance at the fireplace. Dead. The coals are cool, but you remember you do have a hot water bottle. Somewhere. You find it under the bed, wrapped in flannel, lukewarm, but better than nothing. You hug it to your middle like a small, judgmental cat. This is comfort, not fashionable, not fragrant, just warm. Historians still argue whether Victorian women's sleepwear choices were more about health, modesty, or the strict choreography of femininity. Most likely, it was a bit of all three, but on nights like this, when every layer feels both necessary and ridiculous, it's hard not to wonder who all this was really for. You return to bed, now fully wrapped, layered like an anxious lasagna. You lie down once more. You're warm. That's progress. Still not sleepy, but no longer shivering. The fabric of your nightgown rustles faintly as you shift. It's heavy with embroidery, flowers, vines, and one stubborn pear near the hem that you always forget is there until your toe snags on it. You imagine it judging you. Still awake, it says in thread. You pull the covers up to your chin. Close your eyes. Listen again to the old symphony distant clocks, the groan of wood, your own breath like a tide going nowhere. For the first time tonight, your body feels vaguely at peace, not relaxed, not rested, but no longer protesting. And that's something. You lie still for several minutes, or what feels like minutes, just waiting. Not even for sleep at this point, just for something. A sign, a sensation, a benevolent hand reaching down from the ceiling and pressing gently on your eyelids. Instead, you get an itch on your ankle. You scratch it, then settle again, then realize you might need to pee. But that thought you ignore. You've made your bed literally, and climbing back out of it now would mean readjusting all the layers. The robe, the socks, the shawl, the hot water bottle currently cooling at your belly like a defeated hedgehog. No, you'll wait. You're Victorian. You have restraint, at least until your bladder stages a full rebellion. Instead, You roll onto your side and let your eyes wander across the dim outline of your fainting sofa. Ah, yes, that soft, crescent-shaped relic of upper-class sensibility. You never actually faint on it, of course, but it's there in your room like a standby actor, ready to accept your prone form when the drama of womanhood becomes just too much. Tonight, though, you regard it as your next option. The bed is clearly being difficult. Maybe the sofa, with its floral upholstery and overly judgmental armrest, will be more forgiving. You rise again, bundle yourself up like a retired opera singer, and cross the room. You lower yourself onto the chaise with all the grace of someone trying not to collapse, but also kind of hoping they do. You sigh once more long, theatrical, and lean back. This is the part of the night where many Victorian women turn to reading. Not adventure novels. Of course, nothing with pirates or scandalous Frenchmen or, heaven forbid, independent female protagonists. Those were reserved for broad daylight and locked drawers. No, nighttime reading had to be calming, modest, proper. You pick up the book resting on the side table, Moral Parables for the Industrious Woman, a title designed less to entertain and more to shame you into sleeping out of sheer boredom. The pages are thin, the font ornate. The first sentence, let us consider the virtuous humility of the spinster apple seller. You close it immediately. Instead, you reach for the slim volume tucked discreetly behind it. The Lost Letters of Mariana Everly, a novel, lightly romantic, lightly absurd, lightly forbidden by your aunt, which makes it perfect. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1800s, many Victorian women had private libraries or at least private stashes of novels they read at night, under blankets or behind dressing screens, though often dismissed as light reading. These stories were among the only imaginative escapes available within the rigid confines of daily life. You open to where you last left off. Mariana, in a scandalous moment, is wandering through a moonlit garden, her hair unbraided in defiance. Gasp. You read a few pages. Your mind flickers pleasantly. The language is flowery, the plot nonsensical, but there's something comforting in the rhythm of it. In this world, problems are solved by letters. Misunderstandings last exactly 2 chapters. And every woman has at least one walk in the rain that changes her life. Compared to real-life utter fantasy. But then again, so is sleeping 8 uninterrupted hours in a Victorian corset-warped spine. You shift on the chaise. The upholstery lets out a quiet creak, as if judging your literary choices. You ignore it, turn another page. Mariana is now confronting her cousin's suitor, armed with a basket of figs and a devastating sense of moral superiority. You're almost proud of her. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women had reading screens, small portable shields they placed around candle flames to allow for safer and secret nighttime reading. Others went further, commissioning reading lamps disguised as perfume bottles or busts of Queen Victoria. Because nothing says modesty like literary espionage. You continue reading, page after page. The words begin to blur, not because you're tired, but because they've done their job. They've pulled you just far enough away from the real world that your brain can start to float. Historians still argue whether these late-night reading habits were acts of quiet rebellion or simply coping mechanisms. Probably both. Either way, they provided something the daylight rarely did: privacy, imagination, and a rare moment of autonomy. You close the book, gently, and rest it on your chest. You don't feel awake, exactly, but not quite asleep either. Suspended, like your soul is pacing just behind your eyelids. You stay like that for a while, listening again, not to the house this time, but to the faint echoes of the story still blooming behind your eyes. Eventually, you rise from the chaise and pad back to bed, slowly, as if the act itself has become a kind of performance. Each step part of a ritual you don't entirely understand, but feel compelled to repeat. You climb under the covers. This time, you don't adjust. You don't fluff or fold. You simply lie there, a little warmer, a little calmer, book still clutched loosely in one hand. Your mind flickers with fragments Mariana's garden, the sound of your own breath, the weight of wool against your skin. None of it clear, all of it soft. And for the first time tonight, sleep doesn't feel impossible, just unlikely. But unlikely is better than nothing. You're half asleep, or maybe half dreaming. You can't tell anymore. The edges of thought are smudged like damp ink on old paper, and then knock, or maybe a thud, or a shift in the silence that sounds like a knock. Either way, your eyes open. Not in alarm, more like resigned curiosity. What now? The room is still as before. The book has slid off your chest and landed gently beside you. The candle on the vanity has burned itself to a stub. The fire is well and truly dead. You sigh at this point, practically part of your breathing pattern, and sit up again. A very light chill coils up from the floor, touching your ankles like it's asking for a dance. You reach for the drawer beside your bed, not the one with the journal, the other one, the one you pretend not to know too well. Inside is your personal stash of home remedies, each tucked away in little glass bottles, sachets, and tins. Some have labels, others don't. You recognize them by smell or memory or superstition. And tonight, well, you might need one of the stronger options. Let's take stock. There's the lavender oil harmless, polite, barely effective. The valerian root tincture earthy and just unpleasant enough to feel medicinal. The camphor cream probably expired. And tucked at the very back, a square tin with a handwritten label that simply reads, Soothing Draft. You hesitate. That one is not exactly from the apothecary. A friend passed it along. Strictly for emergencies, she'd whispered, with the expression of someone handing over state secrets or a love letter. 1 spoon only. Small spoon. You take it out and study it. The tin is dented and faintly sticky. You open it. The scent hits you first, sweet, floral, and something sharp beneath it. Not dangerous, but definitely something. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Victorian women had ready access to a wide array of over-the-counter sleep aids that today would raise every medical eyebrow. Laudanum, chloral hydrate, opium-based tonics, and soothing syrups were sold without prescription. The line between medicine and vice was often blurred, especially when it came to women's sleep. You take a breath, not to prepare, just to feel something familiar. You use the small spoon. The dose is tiny, barely a taste. You swallow it quickly and chase it with a sip of water from your bedside glass. Then you wait. The effect isn't immediate. These things rarely are. But already your limbs feel slightly heavier. Your thoughts don't race, they meander, like children walking home after a long day, distracted by every shiny pebble on the road. You lie back down, again. And now the thoughts begin to drift in strange directions. You're not alarmed. You expected this, maybe even invited it. The tincture works on more than just the body, it unknots the brain, or at least tells it to hush for a while. You think of the remedies women used long before chemists and advertisements got involved. Warm milk mixed with nutmeg, honey stirred into chamomile, or the more creative methods placing a Bible under the pillow, sleeping with garlic around the neck, whispering the alphabet backward while facing north. Here's your quirky tidbit. One popular folk remedy involved sewing tiny sachets of hops into the seams of your pillowcase. The smell was said to induce drowsiness. The downside: it made your pillow smell like beer and despair. You once tried it. Once. You turn slightly onto your side, facing the window. It's still dark out, but not as dark as it was. There's a faint lightness on the edge of the sky, a suggestion that the world is preparing itself, even if you're not. Historians still argue whether women's reliance on sleep remedies was an act of desperation or just one of the few choices they had control over. After all, you couldn't decide when to marry, or where to live, or even how to dress in public. But you could decide what you took in private, what you swallowed, what soothed you. You think of your friend Louisa, who swore by fennel seeds soaked in gin, or your cousin Hattie, who simply rubbed whiskey into her temples and claimed it invited a soft stupor. You always wondered if that was code for something else. The effects of the draft settle deeper now. You feel it in your hands, your shoulders, even your eyes. Not sleep. Not yet. But a softness. A surrender. You don't mind that it's chemically assisted. You're not aiming for a moral victory tonight. Just a few hours of nothingness. Your breathing slows again. The rhythm is smooth now, like a metronome kept in velvet. The sounds in the room seem far away, like they belong to someone else's life. Your eyes flutter, not dramatically, not like in novels, just gently, like they're forgetting why they were open. You think, vaguely, about the label on the tin, soothing draft. It doesn't say what's in it. You don't ask. You just let go, a little more this time. And if not now, then soon? Something shifts again, not in your mind this time, but in the house itself. A new sound, low, steady, like water running through old pipes or someone carrying a kettle across distant tiles. It reminds you there's a whole unseen world humming quietly behind the walls of a Victorian household. And most of it runs because of other women. Women who never get their names engraved in silver or their silhouettes painted onto brooches. The invisible ones. You lie still and listen. That soft clink, a coal bucket being nudged near the kitchen hearth. The hush of cloth, a hallway runner being straightened. The slight, rhythmic splosh. Someone, likely Judith, filling hot water bottles for the morning, long before anyone stirs. The Victorian lady's midnight might be wrapped in lace and lavender, but someone has to relight the fires, warm the water, scrub the linens, and chase off the frost from the chamber pot handles. Someone does the work of preparing sleep, even when you can't find it. You roll onto your back again, noticing, not guiltily, but curiously, how much effort your world takes to maintain, and how much of it you never see during daylight. You know Judith's routine by now. She rises before dawn, wrapped in a wool shawl, hair twisted into a simple knot, eyes already calculating how many fires need lighting and how long the tea must steep. She walks with a pace that's not quite rushed, but never hesitant, steady, quiet, a living metronome. You once asked her boldly, naively, if she ever had trouble sleeping. She just looked at you and said, "I don't have time to be awake that long." Here's your mainstream historical fact. In most Victorian homes, housemaids and ladies' maids were expected to rise by 5 a.m., regardless of the hour they'd gone to sleep. Their work began with stoking bedroom fires, fetching fresh water, and laying out garments, all often completed in silence to avoid disturbing their mistresses. It's likely Judith has already been up twice tonight, once to check the stove's embers, again to refill a jug, and she'll never mention it. You sit up, slowly. The draft is still with you warming, dulling, but you find comfort in motion. You cross the room, reach for the water jug Judith left earlier, and pour yourself another glass. The water is cool now, a little metallic, but it wakes your tongue, makes the room feel less heavy. You imagine Judith in the scullery now, hands red from cold water, sleeves rolled up, thinking about nothing except the next task. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian maids used to sneak in moments of rest by pretending to polish already clean surfaces. If caught, they'd murmur, just touching up the shine, and carry on. A whole secret system of micro-naps and faux shores evolved just to survive the relentless rhythm of other people's comfort. You walk over to the window. Fog again. Of course. Thick as soup and just as flavorless. Street lamps blur in it like lanterns bobbing in a ghostly sea. Somewhere far off, a cart rolls by. No voice calls out, just the wheels, wood against stone, slow and muffled. Below your window, you spot movement. A maid from another house, perhaps dumping ash into the bin, or gathering kindling. She's barely visible in the dark, her outline no more than a suggestion. You wonder if she's thinking about sleep, or if she's given up on it entirely. Historians still argue whether Victorian household structures kept women safe or merely boxed in different cages. Upper-class women were restricted by propriety. Lower-class women were restricted by duty. And in the middle of the night, both groups passed each other like shadows in their own separate orbits. You return to bed. The sheets are still warm. That's Judith's work, too. She'd slipped in earlier and flipped the warmer stone, just like she always does. You hadn't noticed, but you feel it now. You lie back down and pull the covers higher. The room is quiet again, not silent, just still, like a held breath, like the pause between verses in a hymn. You think, not for the first time, about how many of your comforts arrive invisibly. Sleep, when it does come, comes on the back of 1,000 quiet tasks: boiled water, brushed fabrics, a pin straightened, a candle trimmed. And it's easy to forget until the night reminds you. Your eyes begin to drift closed again. This time, slower. The draft has done its work. So has the warm blanket. And the sense small but strong that somewhere nearby, someone is moving through darkness not to escape it, but to make it kinder for you. Your breathing deepens. The house holds you, not just in stone and wood, but in all the unseen hands that press the pillows, seal the windows, and carry silence like a gift. And slowly, gently, you begin to slip. It starts with a thought, small, uninvited, and horribly inconvenient. What if sleeplessness means something is wrong with you? Not just physically, but morally? A weakness of spirit? A failure of womanhood? You try to brush it away, but this is Victorian England, and that kind of shadow has a way of creeping back in through the floorboards. You're lying in bed, as still as you can be, eyes closed, breath steady, doing everything right, but still no sleep. And the question returns: are you not virtuous enough? Not disciplined enough? Too distracted? Too sensitive? You sigh. Because of course you sigh, it's practically your catchphrase by now. You were warned about this, weren't you? Not by your doctor. Not really. But by everybody else. The aunts, the governess, the books, the whole social fog around you that insists sleep is not just natural, it's earned. In the Victorian worldview, rest was a moral achievement. A woman who slept well was considered calm, pure, properly adjusted. A woman who didn't was restless, nerve-ridden, undisciplined, possibly even dangerous. Your cousin Rebecca once confessed that she hadn't slept through the night in nearly a year. She smiled while she said it, eyes hollow. She was sent to Bath for her nerves a week later. When she returned, she smiled less. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Victorian medical literature, insomnia in women was often pathologized as a symptom of hysteria, neurasthenia, or female malaise. Sleep was seen not only as physical maintenance, but as a reflection of mental and moral health, especially in women of a certain class. You stare at the ceiling again. It hasn't changed, but now it seems to press down on you just a little. Maybe you're imagining that. Or maybe you're remembering that doctor's pamphlet tucked inside your desk drawer, the one that claimed no respectable woman ought to complain of sleeplessness if her heart is clean and her habits steady. Well, that's comforting. Victorian women lived under a strange kind of microscope, one that examined not only their behavior, but their unconscious states. Were your dreams appropriate? Were you sleeping in the right position? Were your thoughts modest even as you drifted into slumber? You turn on your side and pull the blanket tighter. Somehow, that thought is colder than the night air. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some etiquette manuals warned against dreaming about men, even unintentionally. Women were encouraged to say a brief prayer before bed, specifically to guard their sleep against unclean imaginings. One book even suggested keeping a crucifix under your pillow, not just for piety, but as a shield against nocturnal temptation. You tried that once. The crucifix poked you in the cheek and left a dent that looked suspiciously like a sin. Historians still argue whether these beliefs came more from religion, pseudoscience, or just centuries of accumulated anxiety about the female body. But the result was the same sleepless women were a problem that needed solving, and preferably quietly. You recall hearing a conversation between your mother and her sister once, spoken in that hushed tone reserved for scandalous topics like divorce, fainting spells, or German poets. They whispered about a woman from church, someone disturbed, someone who tosses all night and stares out windows like she's waiting for something that won't come. The tone was heavy with concern, but also warning, as if you could catch insomnia the way you'd catch a cough. Or worse, cause it. You stare toward the faint outlines of your dressing screen, the chair where your bonnet now lies crumpled, the ghostly shimmer of your tea tray. The room is silent, but your thoughts are loud now. Not chaotic, just persistent. The kind that circles slowly, like a cat deciding whether to leave the room. You breathe deeply, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 4. You've been told that's virtuous too. A woman in control of her breathing is a woman in control of her emotions. And a woman in control of her emotions might earn a peaceful night. But sleep doesn't reward effort. It's not a prize you unlock by being good. You remind yourself of that, quietly, firmly, almost kindly. Just because you're awake doesn't mean you're unwell. Just because your sleep doesn't look like theirs doesn't mean it's broken. Maybe it's the expectation that's unreasonable, not your body. You shift in bed again, this time without the guilt. You punch the pillow into a shape that suits you. You curl one foot out from under the covers. The room is no different, but you feel a little less small inside it. You think again of Cousin Rebecca. You wonder if she still struggles, or if the trip to Bath did something other than make her an expert in mineral content and boredom. You should write to her. Ask how she's sleeping. Use real words, not just fatigue or flutterings, but are your nights still long? Do your shoulders still ache from lying, still too long? Maybe she'd write back. Maybe she'd send a page from her own journal, or a new tea blend, or a poem that makes no sense but still soothes. Maybe she'd just say, "Me too." That thought helps. It doesn't knock you out like the soothing draft, but it puts something warm behind your ribs. Your body softens a little. Your breathing steadies. You're still awake, but no longer fighting it. And for tonight, that's enough. You lie there quietly, somewhere between peace and perplexity. When the faintest anxiety begins to creep in, not about your soul, or your virtue, or your bonnet's location, but about time. You don't know what time it is, not exactly, but it's definitely too late to still be awake, and somehow also too early to consider it morning. That fragile, glassy hour when nothing feels real and everything feels slightly wrong. The Victorians had a complicated relationship with time, not just the ticking of clocks, but the sense of time, the pressure of it, the fear that you weren't managing it correctly. And nowhere was that pressure greater than at night, when time slows to a crawl and every hour you lie awake feels like a small personal failure. You sit up again, just enough to glance at the shadows along the curtains. Still no sunlight. The gaslight outside the window flickers faintly. That means the watchman hasn't passed to extinguish it yet. So, you guess, somewhere between 3 and 5 in the morning. An hour not meant to exist, let alone be occupied. You reach toward your nightstand where your pocket watch used to sit, before you gave it away. You'd been told that watching the time after midnight was like watching your own dignity wither in real time. You believed it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the 19th century, many middle and upper-class women were actively discouraged from having clocks in their bedrooms. Doctors claimed it increased night fixations, and moralists warned that knowing the exact hour after midnight disturbed the natural rhythm of feminine repose. Time became a thing you measured by candle height, footstep echoes, and how many times your pillow had been flipped. But of course, you still want to know. You always do. You glance toward the window again and try to feel the time. Not tell it, just sense it, like a migrating bird or a nervous butler. You remember hearing about a woman, your mother's friend, who threw out every clock in her house after her 4th child was born. "I don't sleep by numbers anymore," she said, "only by the rhythm of my own regrets." You thought it was a joke. Now, it sounds like religion. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian insomniacs used to keep time journals not to record what they did hour by hour, but to guess what time it was at various points in the night, based purely on how they felt. Entries would read, "Woke again," "Feels like 3, possibly half past," "Chest tight," "Back sore," "Still no sound from stables." You tried this once. Your guesses were spectacularly wrong, but the act of guessing calmed you, somehow, as if making friends with the hours, even inaccurately, was better than fighting them. You get out of bed, not to pace, not to check, just to move. You cross the room slowly and light a fresh candle from the stub on your vanity. The flame flares up, then settles into a low golden glow. It casts long shadows that make your bureau look like a tomb, and your bookshelf look like a cathedral. You walk to the window and press your hand against the cold glass. You imagine the time is about 4:10 a.m. Not because you know, but because your bones tell you. That subtle ache behind your eyes, that hum in your knees, that peculiar dullness in your fingertips. It feels like 4:10. You stand there for a while. The outside world is empty. No milk cart yet, no horses, no birds. Just a thick, heavy pause that seems to stretch across every rooftop and chimney in the city. Historians still argue whether this anxious hour-watching was more prevalent in women because of biology, upbringing, or sheer lack of distraction. After all, you weren't allowed to wander the streets. You couldn't light up the drawing room and play the pianoforte at full volume. All you could do was lie still, count the hours you weren't sleeping, and wonder what that said about you. You whisper out loud, "It's too early for anything, and too late for nothing." The room doesn't disagree. You turn back toward your bed. It looks gentler now, less smug, like it's trying again, this time without the attitude. You climb back in. Rest your head on the cool side of the pillow. Let the candle flicker beside you. Let your limbs go slack, not in surrender, but in quiet detachment. You breathe in, long, deep. You imagine it's 4:32 now. Still no light in the sky. Still no sleep in your bones. But you're not panicking anymore. You're just passing through. There's a strange freedom in not knowing the exact time. It means you're not late, not early, not behind or ahead. You simply are. And in that moment, with the blanket heavy on your chest, the candle humming faintly, and the world still entirely asleep, you start to drift again. Not quickly, not dramatically, but like fog rolling back across a field. No ticking clock to count the seconds. No shame to measure the hours. Just breath, stillness, and the quiet understanding that the night has no schedule but your own. You wake or don't. It's one of those strange intervals where sleep doesn't announce itself, But neither does wakefulness. You're simply floating, light as muslin, mind slightly blurred, like a chalk sketch smudged by a careless thumb. The candle has burned itself low again. The wick curls like a sleeping cat. The shadows in the room are longer now, less like shapes and more like thoughts. You blink slowly. Something's changed. The air feels different, heavier, but not unpleasantly so. And then you remember it's the spirit hour. You've heard whispers. Of course, not in salons or lectures, no. Proper women don't discuss such things, but in quiet drawing rooms after supper, or in the laundry with sleeves rolled up, or whispered across the tea table when someone thinks no one else is listening. This is the hour when the veil thins, when the house breathes a little deeper, and the dead stretch their legs. You are not afraid. You don't believe in ghosts. Except when you do. Victorian England had a complicated relationship with spiritualism, and women even more so. Séances were fashionable, yes, but also suspect. To contact the dead was daring, but to do it while wearing satin gloves and sitting beside your vicar's wife, socially acceptable, with just enough thrill to keep it interesting. You've never attended a séance, but you've read about them. The tapping on tables, the fluttering of curtains, the woman who moaned like a wind-up doll and claimed to channel the soul of Lord Byron, though she didn't know a single poem of his. You lie still now, listening. One creak, two, a thump below stairs, maybe a pipe, maybe Judith, or maybe something else entirely. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The spiritualist movement in Victorian Britain peaked in the mid to late 1800s, with séances, ghost photography, and table-turning becoming commonplace among middle and upper-class families. Women were often the mediums seen as more emotionally open or spiritually sensitive. And of course, many of them were insomniacs. It makes a strange kind of sense, doesn't it? Awake in the deepest hour of night, with no one else to talk to, no electricity, no distractions, only you and the darkness. Maybe the dead weren't summoned. Maybe they just found you, sitting alone with your thoughts and your tea-stained journal. You once read an account of a woman in Cheltenham who said her insomnia was cured by nightly conversations with her dead mother. She'd sit at her writing desk, light 2 candles, and just talk. Not with incantations, no theatrics, just soft, whispered catch-ups. I told her what I wore that day. The woman wrote. I told her what I ate. She never spoke back, but I knew she was listening. You wonder if that would help. Not ghosts necessarily, but just the pretending the idea that someone, somewhere, is keeping you company in the dark. You shift slightly and glance at the vanity mirror. It catches the light strangely. You could almost believe there's a face there. Not yours, just behind yours. But you don't flinch. You're too tired to be dramatic, too tired to panic. And besides, the dead, if they are here, don't seem to want anything, just to be present. Here's your quirky tidbit. One Victorian sleep remedy advised women to hang a small bell beside the bed and ring it gently but with purpose, if they felt the air grow too thick with spirits. No one ever explained what too thick meant. You consider adding a bell to your nightstand. You sit up, slowly, not in fear, just in curiosity. You feel observed, not watched, not judged, just gently included in something you don't fully understand. You whisper into the room not a name, not a question, just a It feels like manners, somehow. Historians still argue whether Victorian women turned to spiritualism out of true belief or out of desperation for connection. After all, when you're expected to repress emotion, maintain silence, and sleep 8 uninterrupted hours with your hands folded over your ribcage like a statue, a ghost might be the most honest conversation you have all day. You lie back down again. The feeling fades, not entirely, but enough that your heartbeat evens out. The shadows seem friendlier now, less like shapes trying to get in, more like old memories that forgot to leave. Your fingers play absently with the edge of your pillowcase. You hum, softly, a lullaby you don't remember learning. The sound barely breaks the air. And for a moment, you imagine you're not alone. Not exactly, not frighteningly, just peacefully accompanied by your mother or grandmother or some quiet figure with strong hands and a sensible apron who sits beside your bed and says, "I know. You're tired. It's all right. I'll sit with you a while." You don't believe in ghosts. Except when you do. The room has changed again. Not dramatically, no chairs floating, no thunderclaps, but there's a new stillness, heavier, like the walls are listening, like the carpet's holding its breath. Your eyes blink slowly, trying to adjust. You lie flat, spine pressed into the mattress, arms by your side like a politely interred saint. And then tap. Just one. Then again, tap tap. Not loud, not urgent, but not part of the usual chorus of creaks and wind and nighttime nonsense. It's deliberate, rhythmic, and it's coming from the hallway. Your body doesn't jolt. You're too far gone for that. Your mind, however, begins to pace even as your limbs stay heavy under the blanket. The sound continues. A pause, then another tap, then nothing. And suddenly, you remember the stories, not of ghosts this time, but of sleepwalkers. Victorian society was fascinated by the idea of somnambulism, particularly in women. It was the perfect blend of scandal and science, of innocence and danger. A woman who wandered her home in her sleep was not just unwell, she was mysterious, romantic, tragic, a heroine in a corset. You ease yourself up onto your elbows. The sound is gone now. The hallway, silent. But the idea has taken root. Could it be Judith? No, she's far too practical for wandering. The dog. You don't have a dog. Another servant? Possibly. But in this hour, under this moonless sky, your mind prefers the more poetic answer. Someone adrift in their own dreaming. A woman in a nightgown, hair wild, eyes wide, moving without destination, like a candle flame with feet. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Victorian medical journals frequently discussed female sleepwalking as both a symptom of hysteria and a subject of fascination. Some doctors believed it revealed the hidden emotional life of women, while others considered it a sign of spiritual possession or deep, unmet desire. You rise and reach for your shawl, just in case. The air near the door is colder. Of course it is. You crack the door open and peer into the hall. Nothing. But the carpet shows a faint disturbance like someone shuffled past with soft slippers. You listen. No footsteps, no voices, just that heavy, waiting silence. You remember a girl from boarding school, Clara. She sleepwalked twice during Lent. Once she made it all the way to the chapel. They found her on the floor in her nightdress, clutching a hymnal and murmuring something about green velvet. The headmistress said it was a fever, but the girls whispered about heartbreak. You step into the hallway and feel the chill ripple up your legs. The lamps have all gone out now. No gas, no flame, just moonlight finally showing its face. Pale, soft, entirely indifferent. You walk slowly, listening. You don't really expect to find anyone. Not really. But the image persists. A sleepwalker in crinoline, barefoot, drifting. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some Victorian homes, sleep safety furniture was sold specifically low barriers and padded headboards designed to protect ladies prone to somnambulism. One famous model, the Midnight Rail, was a polished wooden bedguard advertised with the tagline, "For those whose souls wander before their bodies follow." You pause at the top of the stairs. Nothing, not even a flicker, just a staircase descending into velvet blackness. You turn back. You don't see a figure, not exactly, but you feel seen just for a moment. A presence, maybe, or a dream that didn't dissolve properly. You return to your room. As you pass the mirror, you glance, but only with your eyes, not your head. You've learned better. Mirrors hold too much in this hour. Back under the covers, back where it's warm, you wrap yourself like a scroll, breathing slow. The tapping hasn't returned, but the air remembers it. Historians still argue whether Victorian sleepwalking accounts were exaggerated or simply misunderstood. After all, many of these women were denied daytime freedoms. Perhaps sleep was the only time their bodies could move without permission. You lie still now. Your fingers rest atop the blanket. You imagine them curling into fists as you walk, eyes shut, through long hallways and locked doors and gardens slick with dew. Not in fear, in longing. Maybe you've sleepwalked before. Maybe you are sleepwalking now, dreaming this very thought from 3 rooms away. But the bed is solid, the pillow is warm, your eyes flutter once, twice. You don't hear the tapping again, but you remember it. And as sleep finally stretches toward you, slow, fog-like, forgiving, you wonder. If your body ever does rise without you, will it remember to be kind? The tapping never returns, but your thoughts find new ways to scratch at the quiet. You lie still, almost peaceful, when another old sensation returns. Not a noise this time, not a chill, just longing. Not for sleep, not even for silence, but for someone. You roll gently onto your back. The ceiling greets you like an old friend who always wants to talk about the same 3 topics. You close your eyes instead. The memories are clearer that way. This is the part of the night that belongs to letters, lovers, and late-night longing. And in the Victorian world, that meant one thing above all: the hidden lives of respectable women, ink-stained, tear-smudged, and neatly folded beneath pillowcases and prayer books. You reach toward the small lacquered box on your nightstand. Inside, wrapped in ribbon and polite denial, are a handful of letters. Not scandalous, not exactly, but certainly not approved for casual display. You untie the ribbon? They aren't all from him. Some are from your friend Eleanor, who moved to Wales and never stopped sending detailed, emotional accounts of the weather. Some are from your sister, who still underlines every 3rd word like she's writing a code. But the ones you're looking for, the ones your fingers find by feel, are his. No perfume, no endearments, just safe phrasing, practiced restraint, but in between the lines, hunger, frustration, admiration, the sort of careful praise that avoids exclamation marks but practically begs to be whispered aloud in the dark. You hold one now. You don't need to read it. You know it by heart. I saw you at the gallery. You didn't see me, or perhaps you pretended not to. Either way, it was enough. That one always undoes you. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the Victorian era, love letters between unmarried individuals, especially when written at night, were considered both deeply romantic and dangerously improper. For women, keeping such letters was an act of emotional rebellion, and many hid them in sewing boxes, behind false drawers, or even stitched into the hems of dresses. You tuck the letter back without unfolding it. Just touching the paper is enough. It has weight, memory, consequence, more intimate than conversation, more durable than touch. And then you think of the other letters, the ones you never sent, the ones you drafted mentally, usually right around this hour. Like I'm not sleeping again. I wish you were here, not to hold me, just to know. Or I'm tired of pretending that I don't miss something I've never had. Or sometimes just, do you ever think of me at this hour, when the house is quiet and you're finally honest? Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women created entire dream letter journals, pages of unsent correspondence written to imagined or absent lovers. A few even sealed them and addressed them to future dates, hoping one day they'd either forget the ache or remember it more fondly. You've never done that. Not seriously. But once, after a night of wine and rain and too many sighs, you sealed a blank page just to feel what it was like. You still have it, somewhere. Maybe it's enough to simply imagine the reply. The room is warmer now, not physically, just emotionally. The letters have a way of doing that. They pull the world in close, let you pretend, if only briefly, that someone's listening from far away. Someone with the same ache behind the ribs, the same untamed thoughts, the same restless nights. Historians still argue whether Victorian women's letter-writing habits were expressions of love or symptoms of repression. But that's the thing, they can be both. A letter is a kind of confession you get to keep, a prayer with punctuation, a wound folded neatly in an envelope. You lie back, hands resting on your stomach, the faintest curl of a smile brushing your lips. Not joy, but recognition. That version of you who wrote those letters still lives here, still lingers in the fingertips, still glows, faintly, in the dark. The longing doesn't go away, but it softens, becomes manageable, even kind. It's no longer a plea, it's a presence, a part of you that simply sits by the bed and waits. You think, briefly, of writing something new, but not now, not yet. For the moment, it's enough to have remembered, to have reached back and found a pulse still there. You close your eyes. The room doesn't change, but your breath does. The letters are tucked away again, the ribbon tied with reverent fingers, and the ache that once pulled across your chest now rests quietly in the corner of the room, like an old cat watching you blink. You settle back into the familiar groove in your mattress, one arm under the pillow, one knee bent in a gentle curl. Your body knows this shape now. It's the pose of surrender, the nightly truce between you and the sleep that still refuses to come. But tonight, something else stirs under the surface. Not longing, not worry, resistance. Because for all the lace and etiquette and tinctures you've swallowed without blinking, there's one thing you're still not fully comfortable with. How much of your body, your rest, your very nights, aren't entirely yours. You lie still, thinking about it now, not in a panicked way, but in the way one turns a key slowly, knowing there's something locked behind the door. That thing, the Victorian bedroom, wasn't just a resting place, it was a battleground. Not always dramatic, not always violent, but always contested. Because in this era, a woman's body wasn't just hers. It belonged, in fragments, to others, the doctor with the cold hands and confident quill, the husband with expectations and a nightly cough, the clergyman who said a clean mind meant a quiet heart, even the mother who frowned at your posture and your diet and the way you furrowed your brow. And here, at night, in this quiet little tomb of curtains and perfume, that battle continues. You shift under the covers. Victorian women were told to go to bed at the proper time, to be still, to sleep neatly, to avoid indulgence, to make themselves available sometimes for conversation, sometimes for comfort, sometimes for duties best left vague in polite company. And they were told not to complain. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Victorian medical advice often positioned women's sleep or lack thereof as a reflection of their domestic harmony. A good wife slept well, served well, and remained untroubled by nocturnal disturbance. Doctors routinely prescribed sleep as a cure for everything from marital discord to irrational outbursts, and when that didn't work, they prescribed silence. You pull the blanket tighter, not for warmth this time, for armor. There were rules about everything in a Victorian bedroom. Which side of the bed you were allowed to sleep on, whether you could shut the door completely, how loud you were permitted to breathe, whether you could say no. Even in your own room, even here, your rest was never truly private. Judith could walk in without knocking. A cousin could be moved into your bed temporarily. A guest might comment on your posture the next morning over kippers and tea. You think about the medical exam you endured last year, the one where the doctor asked how often you dreamed of falling, the one where he sniffed once and said, "It's not your sleep, dear, it's your sentimentality." You think about the time your mother said, "Don't make a scene," when you tried to explain why you were awake for the 5th night in a row. You think about the minister's wife who whispered that a certain kind of restlessness was a sign of moral curiosity and suggested more prayer and less reading. Here's your quirky tidbit. In certain Victorian homes, married women were instructed to sleep with their hands crossed over their chest, not for comfort, but to avoid inappropriate stimulation of the body's lower energies. This advice, often printed in moral hygiene booklets, was given with the same gravity one might use to describe a burglary. Historians still argue whether these restrictions were truly about health or simply another layer of control draped in the language of care. But you don't need a historian, you've lived it. You sigh, again. This one is different. Lower, heavier, like something pulled up from the spine. You remember reading a story once, probably apocryphal, about a woman who rearranged her entire bedroom while her husband was away. Moved the bed to face the window, took down the crucifix, painted the walls, slept diagonally for the first time in her life. When he returned, she told him the spirits had instructed her. He never questioned her sleep again. You like her. You shift now not for comfort, but for protest. You stretch out like a starfish, one arm overhead, one leg flung across the mattress like a conqueror. This is your bed. This is your night. And even if you don't sleep, even if you lie awake counting cracks in the ceiling, you'll do it on your own terms. Your breathing slows, not because you're relaxed, but because you've stopped waiting for permission to be comfortable. The room doesn't reward you with sleep, but it does feel quieter, more yours, less like a museum exhibit, more like a shelter, a small, firm act of reclamation in a world of prescriptions. You think again of all the women past and present who've tossed and turned not because they were unwell, but because the very idea of rest was never offered freely. You won't fix that tonight, but you can take up space. And maybe that's enough. The room has grown still again, not just quiet, but respectful, like it recognizes the tiny rebellion you've just performed by daring to sprawl diagonally across the mattress. Your limbs have found new positions, unladylike but satisfying. Your toes hang just slightly off the edge. Your hair fans out in ungoverned waves. For once, your body feels like it belongs to no one else. Still not asleep, but you're closer. And while you wait, there's one more thing within reach. You sit up, lean over the edge of the bed, and tug open the bottom drawer of your vanity. Inside your dream manual, small, blue, fraying at the edges, the gentlewoman's guide to dreams and their interpretations. You lift it like it's sacred. In its way, it is. It's not exactly accurate. Even you know that. But it's one of the few books that dares to suggest your nighttime wanderings might have meaning. That your dreams are messages, not malfunctions. That they might say something your waking life isn't allowed to. You flip through the pages now, skimming the well-thumbed entries. A horse passion, a locked door frustration, a staircase social ambition, teeth falling out vanity, a burning candle secret love, falling endlessly spiritual doubt. You pause at spiders, which you dreamed of last week, anxiety, scheming, or an overdue letter. That tracks. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dream manuals were wildly popular in the 19th century, especially among women, sold in apothecaries, railway stations, and sometimes tucked into the backs of household almanacs. These books claimed to decode the symbolism of sleep. Some claimed biblical authority, others leaned into folklore and superstition. You lie back and flip through the book slowly. It's almost comforting, this catalog of the absurd. A pigeon is a secret. A fountain is a child. A ladder is the Lord. It makes as much sense as anything else you've been told lately. Dreams, after all, are the one part of sleep society hasn't entirely colonized. They're still messy, strange, yours. And the Victorians, for all their primness, were obsessed with them. There were salons dedicated to dream analysis, priests who used dreams as confession, even doctors who charted the phases of the moon against women's reported nightmares to determine if they were possessed of an overheated constitution. You once read about a duchess who consulted a dream interpreter before every dinner party, claimed her social intuition was derived entirely from sleep. She was adored and probably exhausted. Here's your quirky tidbit. A fringe movement in the 1880s believed that dreams were not only meaningful, but moral indicators. If a woman dreamed of kissing someone she wasn't married to, she was advised to fast the next day, write a page of scripture by hand, and wear a binding ribbon under her blouse as a reminder to discipline the soul. You'd run out of ribbon in a week. You tuck the manual back into the drawer, but the idea stays with you. Not the punishments, not the omens, but the possibility that your dreams might be trying to tell you something. You close your eyes and try to recall your last proper dream. Not a half-thought or a worry wearing a costume, but a real dream. A world your mind built without asking permission. You remember a staircase, endless, velvet carpet, candles, and someone at the top, blurry, familiar, not speaking, just waiting. You didn't reach them, but you try again now. In your imagination, you picture the stairs, one step, then another, the carpet plush beneath your feet, the flickering glow of gaslight brushing your cheeks, the strange comfort of movement with no clear destination. Historians still argue whether these dream practices gave women true insight or were simply another method of control. But in the quiet dark of your room, you decide that maybe the truth isn't as important as the agency of the ritual, the choice to read your own symbols, to interpret your own mind. You let your thoughts drift through imagined corridors. You give yourself permission to dream even if you're still awake. You rearrange the pillows. You soften your shoulders. Your fingers twitch once, then still. You don't need sleep to feel rest tonight. Not entirely. You just need this a story told to yourself by yourself. A strange little myth written in the ink of your own brain. Maybe you'll remember it tomorrow. Maybe you won't. But tonight, it's enough to begin the climb. You must have dozed off at least for a moment, because when your eyes open again, the shadows have shifted. Just slightly, but enough. The sky outside is no longer solid black, but a murky blue-gray, like someone diluted ink with milk. You don't see the sun, but you feel its approach. And with it comes a small, anxious flutter behind your ribs. You didn't sleep, or not properly. A few scraps of rest strung together like poor embroidery. And now, morning lurks just beyond the curtains like a houseguest you're not ready to greet. You press your palms into your eyes and breathe out through your nose. Slow, controlled. The draft has worn off. The tea cooled hours ago. You feel heavy, not in a cozy way, but like you're wrapped in wet wool. Every limb tired, yet still buzzing faintly, as if your nerves are pacing even though your muscles have given up. And then the thought creeps in. What if this becomes permanent? This is the dark side of Victorian sleeplessness, not just the momentary inconvenience, but the looming dread of being labeled mad, fragile, or worst of all, unsound. You sit up slowly, swinging your legs over the edge of the bed. Your feet touch the rug like it might break. You reach for your robe again, tying it tighter than it needs to be. Something about that pressure feels necessary, like armor. Here's your mainstream historical fact. During the 19th century, chronic insomnia in women was increasingly linked to madness. Case records from asylums show a troubling trend: women admitted for delirium. Melancholia, or raving, often had one shared symptom in their files: persistent inability to sleep. In some cases, sleep deprivation was treated with cold baths, restraints, or total sensory deprivation. You walk to the wash basin, splash cool water on your face. It doesn't help, but it's a ritual. And rituals are how you keep hold of yourself. You catch your reflection in the mirror, pale, puffy-eyed, not unrecognizable, but not quite you either. You remember the pamphlet you read last winter, The Shattered Woman on the Dangers of Mental Disturbance in the Fairer Sex. It showed a sketch of a woman with wild hair, surrounded by jagged shapes, eyes wide, staring at something no one else could see. You look nothing like her, yet something about her posture stays with you. There's a cruel irony in the Victorian treatment of women's mental health. The same conditions that caused sleeplessness, rigid expectations, emotional suppression, endless social monitoring were also cited as evidence of your instability once you cracked under them. You don't feel cracked. Not yet. But you understand now why women in novels started talking to their furniture. It's not madness, it's survival. When the world expects you to be serene and you haven't slept properly in 3 weeks. A brief chat with the armoire can feel downright restorative. You sit down on the edge of the bed, rubbing your temples. A headache builds not sharp, but dull and persistent, like a door creaking slowly open inside your skull. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some asylums, women diagnosed with insomniac hysteria were prescribed blanket therapy, a method where the patient was wrapped tightly in damp woolen sheets and left in a dark room for hours, sometimes overnight. The idea was that the weight and restriction would soothe the stormy mind. Most women reported it made them feel like a potato left out in the rain. You imagine that? A soggy, restrained potato? You nearly laugh. But it comes out as a small, polite exhale. Even your humor is exhausted. You rise again, slowly, and light the candle for the last time. The flame flickers uncertainly. You know how it feels. The light reveals more of the room, now subtle outlines, textures, the chair, the books, the pile of folded laundry Judith left earlier, neatly arranged and slightly tilting, like even cotton is tired. You stare at it, not with resentment, but with the deep, quiet envy reserved for inanimate things. It gets to rest. You don't. Historians still argue whether the link between insomnia and madness was a reflection of actual psychological strain or merely a social tool to dismiss women's distress. But the evidence is clear. Sleeplessness in women was treated not as a symptom, but as a fault, a flaw to be corrected, shamed, or locked away. You return to the bed one last time, not to sleep, but to lie back and let the ceiling have you. You stare up at it like a confessor. Say nothing. Just breathe. You remind yourself of what Judith told you once quietly. While brushing your hair after a particularly bad night, you're not broken. Miss, just tired in a place no pillow can reach. You've held on to that. You believe it. Mostly. So you lie there, one hand across your stomach, one arm stretched toward the cool side of the bed. The sky outside shifts again, slightly less gray, slightly more forgiving. You don't feel mad. You don't feel well-rested. You just feel real. And sometimes, that's enough to make it to morning. You stay in bed longer than you need to, not because you expect sleep now, but because getting up feels like surrender, like stepping back into a world that doesn't know or care, that you've been fighting for rest all night and lost. Again. Still, your body urges you forward. You stretch slowly, pulling each limb free from the tangle of blankets and quiet disappointments. The floor is cool, your feet stiff, but you're upright? That's something. Your dressing gown waits for you like a patient old friend. You wrap it around your shoulders and tie the sash one-handed, while the other reaches for the object that's become both your comfort and your curse, the patent medicine bottle. There it is on your side table, small, amber, and confident. Dr. Lawley's Restorative Elixir for the Fretful and Fatigued. The label is peeling. You don't need to read it anymore. You know every claim, every promise, every ingredient listed in fanciful typeface, and more importantly, the ones it doesn't. It's not the same one you took last week, or the week before. You've tried half a dozen by now, all slightly different, all somehow the same. Victorian shelves were lined with bottles like these. They promised peace, balance, sleep. They came wrapped in gold foil labels and flowed from crystal decanters into porcelain teaspoons. They made you feel cared for, even when you weren't. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The 19th century saw an explosion in patent medicines, many marketed specifically to women suffering from nervous exhaustion, insomnia, or female troubles. These remedies were rarely regulated, often laced with alcohol, opiates, cocaine derivatives, or all three. Advertising promised everything from better dreams to moral clarity. You sit down at the vanity, the bottle in your hand. You don't take it. Not yet. You just look at it, shake it gently. The liquid inside clings to the glass like it's reluctant too. The thing is, these medicines do work. Sort of. They blunt the edge. They make the world quieter. But the sleep they bring isn't the kind that leaves you refreshed. It's the kind that wraps your brain in gauze and drops it into a pit. You don't wake from it so much as emerge. Slowly, with a sense that something has been left behind. And then there's the other problem. Dependence. You've read the stories. Women who took 3 spoons, then 4, then 5, then they couldn't remember their own birthdays or what color the sky was that morning. You don't want that. But still, you unscrew the cap. The smell is familiar now, sweet, earthy, with a faint bite at the end. You hesitate. Here's your quirky tidbit, one particularly popular Victorian remedy. Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup was marketed as a miracle cure for both teething babies and sleepless mothers. It contained morphine, alcohol, and a touch of chloroform. Unsurprisingly, it worked. Also, unsurprisingly, it caused widespread addiction and was eventually banned after decades on the market. You pour a tiny dose into the spoon. Hold it. Consider it. Then no, not today. Instead, you tip it back into the bottle. Screw the cap tight. Place it at the far end of the vanity. You're not swearing it off entirely. Just not this morning. You reach for your hairbrush instead. Your scalp is tender from all the tossing. Your hair, a mess of rebellion, but brushing it is another ritual. Another way to say I'm still here. I'm still mine. 1 stroke, 2, the soft shh of bristles against scalp. You don't count to 100. You just go until the rhythm calms something inside you. You remember your aunt's words again, better a bitter tonic than a bitter woman. But you're starting to think the two aren't mutually exclusive. Historians still argue whether patent medicines truly improved women's lives or merely numbed them into submission. The truth, as always, lies in the space between. Sometimes they helped, sometimes they harmed, sometimes both in the same night. You tie your hair with a soft ribbon, not because you need to, but because you want to see yourself look composed, even if it's just for a moment, even if you immediately go lie back down. The bottle remains on the table. You see it, acknowledge it, but you do not let it define your morning. You are tired, but you are also awake. The sky has lightened just enough to give shape to the world again. Your room no longer feels like a coffin padded in lace. It feels like what it's always been, a space designed to look restful, but filled with rules, routines, and reminders. But there's warmth now, a soft amber light bleeding around the edges of the curtains. Morning is arriving, whether you slept or not. You stand at the window and part the fabric gently. Outside, the street is quiet. A man in a flat cap pushes a cart of bread. The milk delivery rattles past in clinking rhythm. A maid on the opposite stoop sweeps the front steps with the sleepy indifference of someone who's already tired of today. And you, inside your immaculate room, still in your nightgown, watch it all and think, I should feel human again soon. Surely. The body remembers how to function, even after a night of nothing. The mind less so. But you have tricks for this. Your morning arsenal of oddities, designed not to replace sleep, but to fake its effects until the world no longer notices you missed it. And the most bizarre of those, the early electrical contraptions. Your eyes drift toward the small wooden box on your dressing table. Inside it, wires, metal plates, and a curious device labeled Lady Somnus Nerve Reviver, a gift from your cousin Harriet, who swears it restores the equilibrium of a disturbed constitution. She also believes vinegar removes freckles, so grain of salt. Still, you've used it, more than once. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the late 1800s, a wave of electrotherapy devices flooded the British market, aimed particularly at women, marketed as modern, scientific solutions for sleeplessness, female weakness, and general malaise. These gadgets promised everything from improved complexion to the restoration of lost dreams. Most offered mild tingling sensations at best and temporary eyebrow singeing at worst. You open the box and lift the device. 2 copper rods connected by braided silk cords. There's a battery crank on the side. You dampen the sponges like the instructions say. Press the plates to your temples and slowly wind the mechanism. Buzz. Your teeth vibrate slightly. Your earlobes tingle. Your fingers twitch once, then it's done. Does it work? Not really. But it gives the illusion of doing something, and that alone can be strangely comforting. At least you're not passively enduring your exhaustion, you're zapping it with science. You set the device aside and stretch your arms overhead, not with enthusiasm, but necessity. Your muscles creak, your spine pops faintly. You imagine yourself as an old oak tree, just barely remembering how to grow. And then there's the other method, the more subtle one. You open your wardrobe and pull out a flask-shaped glass bottle. No label, just a gentle swirl of golden liquid inside. It's a daytime tonic different from the ones you refuse at night. This one contains no opium, no laudanum, no absurd claims of divine healing, just bitter herbs, citrus peel, and a dash of something vaguely citrus-scented and bracing. You sip. It tastes like regret and lemon. But it clears your head, slightly, enough. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Victorian day tonics contain trace amounts of strychnine, not enough to kill, but just enough to create a stimulating effect. Advertisements claimed this sharpened the mind, improved digestion, and refreshed the faculties after insufficient sleep. Several ladies fainted anyway. You pour the rest down the sink. You're not quite that desperate. Instead, you move slowly through your room, resetting things for a new cycle. You fold the shawl that helped, just a little. You straighten the bedsheets, not to hide what happened, but to give tomorrow a fair shot. You dab a bit of rose water on your neck, because it makes you feel like the kind of woman who wakes up glowing instead of grimacing. And for the first time all night, the idea of sleep, actual, natural, earned sleep seems less like a fantasy and more like something that might return to you. Not now, not soon, but eventually. Historians still argue whether these devices, tonics, and rituals were empowering examples of women reclaiming their care or just distractions sold to exhausted housewives. You suspect, as always, it's both. Because sometimes survival isn't grand, it's ridiculous. It's copper wires and root extracts and pretending lemon bitters are medicine. You pull the curtains all the way open. The light rushes in, soft, forgiving. The house creaks again, but now it feels like greeting, not warning. And though your body is tired, and your mind is cottony, and your mood is somewhere between neutral and don't speak to me before tea, you're still standing, upright, awake, present, and you made it through the night without disappearing. That counts for something. The room is brighter now, though the light is soft filtered through the gauze of cloudy skies and thin lace curtains. No dramatic sunrise, just a quiet shift in color, like the day unfolding a linen napkin. You sit at your vanity, staring at your own reflection as though trying to remember who she is. Your eyes are rimmed with sleeplessness, your mouth neutral, not quite a smile, not quite a frown, just present. You reach for a hairpin and twist your hair into something neat-ish. You smooth down your sleeves. You look like a woman who slept, or at least like someone who understands how to simulate the appearance. Because now begins the part of the day where everyone else assumes you're fine. The gilded cage reassembles itself with remarkable speed. The clothes, the corset, the routine greetings, the teacup held just so. You'll smile, nod, answer questions with charm. Yes, slept well. Thank you. No, I didn't hear a thing. Oh, yes, the fire kept the room quite warm. You'll lie, not maliciously, not even thoughtfully, just automatically. Because, to speak the truth, that your sleep came in half-hour pockets, that your brain was a brass band of regrets, that you imagined ghosts and electrical pulses and letters never sent well. That would be improper, or worse, uninteresting. Victorian women were expected to be composed, graceful, gentle, and most of all, quiet. You stand now and begin dressing, not with excitement, but with habit. Your underthings are cool against your skin. The corset hugs your ribs like a disappointed ant. The chemisette tickles your collarbone. Your skirts rustle faintly as you step into them, the sound of fabric folding around fatigue. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Morning routines for upper-class Victorian women were elaborate, often involving assistance from a lady's maid, a series of prescribed garments, hair rituals, and cosmetic applications using everything from cold cream to powdered rice starch. The goal was to appear rested and ready, regardless of the night that preceded it. You reach for your day face. It's stored just behind your eyes, somewhere between civility and resignation. You pin it in place with a breath, a smile, and a touch of rose-scented oil behind your ears. Judith knocks, then enters without waiting. She knows better. You greet her with a nod. She doesn't ask if you slept. She looks at the bed, sees it's been made. She places a cup of tea on the side table, adjusts the hem of your skirt, and says, "Breakfast in half an hour. Miss?" You nod again. She leaves. And you are once again a woman in control, or close enough to fool the house. You take a sip of tea. It's warm, earthy, barely bitter. You drink it slowly, one careful mouthful at a time. Your body thanks you in small ways, less resistance in your shoulders, less tremble in your knees. You walk toward the window and open it a crack. The cool morning air brushes your face. The scent of wet stone, chimney smoke, and someone else's soap drifts in. It doesn't wake you up, exactly, but it makes the world feel sharper. You don't feel rested. You may not for days, but you feel anchored, slightly. And that's enough to face what comes next. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some aging Victorian women, especially those who had spent decades suffering from insomnia, developed elaborate pre-sleep exit rituals, removing pins in a precise order, reciting short memorized blessings, folding linens with whispered affirmations. A few even insisted that if you didn't end your night properly, it would linger inside you forever. You believe that? So now, each morning, you create your own opposite a re-entry ritual, a way to let the day in gently. Cup of tea, window open, 3 long breaths, then movement. You brush a crumb off your sleeve, smooth your skirt, step into your shoes. The house is waking fully now. Footsteps in the hallway, a door latch, a clink of dishes. You will soon join them. Sit at the breakfast table. Smile, pass jam, discuss weather, appear normal. They won't know that your night was a novel of sighs, pages of silence, half dreams, and almost sleep. But you will. And tonight maybe, just maybe it will be better. Or not. But either way, you'll be here. You survived the quiet. And that is no small thing. Now, just rest. No more clocks, no more corsets, no more pages left to turn. Let the room grow soft around you again. Let the morning slip back behind the curtains for a little while longer. The tea has gone cool. The letters are folded. The bottle on the vanity is closed and untouched. There's nothing left to do tonight, or today. You've already done it all, felt every hour, tasted every moment. The heavy, quiet kind, the restless kind, the kind no one else sees. Let your body settle, slowly. Let your shoulders drop, your breath slow. The creaks in the floorboards are just the house shifting gently back into its bones. The tapping at the window, only a breeze. Close your eyes. Let your thoughts soften. You don't need to hold them anymore. Let them drift, like dust in morning light. Whatever didn't happen today, whatever you hoped sleep might solve, can wait. There's no rule that says you must rise feeling perfect. Just rise. And if you're not ready yet, then don't. You can stay here a bit longer, right here in this moment, this breath. You've earned it. You're safe. You're enough. Sleep or don't. You're still you. And you made it through the dark.